Hello everyone. In today's video, I am again going to show you a game which featured the Nimzo-Indian. So let's see how it started. e6, knight c3, bishop b4, so far nothing unusual, and here queen b3 is the Spielmann variation, what we want to study, but once again, similarly to yesterday, we transposed the repertoire by a little bit different move order, so knight f3 was played, b6 from black, and only now queen b3. So similarly to the immediate queen b3, black has different options here. Protect the bishop by a5, by c5 are the most common moves, but once again taking on c3 is also possible, even though, as I already explained in the previous video, in case you missed, please check it out, that this bishop c3 is essentially losing a tempo to queen c2. Nimzo-Indian, but nevertheless, it's just a slight mistake from black. So queen c3, bishop b7, and basically this way we transpose to the queen b3. Nimzo, where it happens by queen b3, takes b6, knight f3, bishop b7, and we have the same position. So we go on from here, bishop b7, and this is already an important moment where quite a few players went wrong with white, because I believe probably the most natural move they made, but it's inaccurate, unfortunately, and it's quite important to know. So, in my opinion, white has two good moves in this position. One is e3, which was played in this game, and the other one is g3. The problem with g3 that it really can lead to this Bogo-Indian and Queen's Indian type of position when the trade of the light squared bishops is quite likely in some case. So normally I only like to go g3 if black's knight is already on e4. So just show you like very trivial example, like if black goes knight e4 immediately, queen c2, bishop b7. Now I quite like g3 in such case. So the reason for that is that now once I put my bishop on g2, this bishop eventually on b7 can be pinned. So for example, short castle, bishop g2, I don't know, d6 or something, and already here black has to watch out for moves like knight d2 and knight g5. So that's the difference when the knight is here, otherwise it would be just a trade of bishops with the knight on f6. And in case black starts with this bishop b7, so here I don't like g3 that much, even though it's completely fine and at least as good as e3, but I would rather play e3. So what is the mistake or inaccurate move which you should avoid is bishop g5. What can be more natural than this? Like first develop the bishop and then build the pawn chain so the bishop is outside. But as long as the king is on e8 and not castled short, black has this very effective way of breaking the pin by h6, bishop h4, g5. So black can very comfortably push this pawn because the king is not here. And after knight e4, tempo on the queen, queen c2, f5 even. And black can continue developing like d6, knight d7, and the king is not only perfectly safe on e8, it can even castle maybe sometimes because undermining the king side with h4 is not really possible because the knight takes on g3 spoils our structure. But of course, it's not a must for black at all to castle short quickly. It is just comfortable position, and we didn't manage to use our pair of bishops and even gave black a few tempi to get a quite nice position. So bishop g5 would be not good. So e3 was good. Black played d6. So if you remember yesterday, I showed the game with d5, but that blocks the bishop in that Stonewall type of play. So d6 I would say is more logical. And here kind of strange move was played. Okay, it's not that important. regarding to what I want to show you, but still it's inaccurate to start with b4. So it's like you just play bishop e2 first, then you castle, and then you play b4 or b3 depending on whether black played a5 or not. So you just first finish your development, and then you can push pawns on the queen side. So what you have to check with this early moves b4 is that, of course, white is a little bit undeveloped, and actually there is no comfortable way of reacting to e5. So if black would have played this move, it would have been somewhat uncomfortable. So there is a move b5, which would close the queen side, but let's say black plays knight d7, and then later knight e4, and it will be extremely difficult to make the only available break on the queen side with c5, since all of black pieces are controlling. Maybe even the queen is coming to e7. So yeah, really difficult to make progress there. So normally white doesn't want to push this pawn to b5. To keep it on b4 means that it helps c5 break eventually at some moment, or it just keeps the queen side flexible. But the problem here is that after a3, black can win another tempo with knight e4 on our queen. So the queen has to keep guarding the rook, because queen c2 ab would mean that our rook is unprotected. So queen has to go to b2, where originally the bishop wanted to go. So you can see this is just some uncomfortable things, and black can play, for example, queen f6. Maybe the queen is coming to g6, putting some pressure here. Knight can develop to d7, and I mean, we didn't achieve really that much with this early b4. So in any case, just another useful thing, I believe, to know that if you want really early to gain some space there, you should be ready to meet a5. So in this game, black went knight d7, so didn't make use of this chance. Now bishop b2. So bishop managed to reach a good square, short castle, bishop e2. Again, it's a completely fine, typical Nimzo position, knight e4, queen c2, and black played c5, also quite typical. So I was talking about this this idea of pushing c5 for white at some moment, which is completely possible, or even sometimes pushing for d5. So just to show it, like for example, black makes a nonsense move like h6, and okay, rook d1, for example, I don't know, king h8, d5. So in such position, the c7 pawn is a backward pawn. So basically, what also black prevents by this early c5 move, that whenever white is pushing for d5 and this trade happens on d5, then the c5 pawn will be completely fine. It will be not a backward pawn. So it's not only prevents c5, but it's actually also very good against d5. So this is just a good move. White played a3. So as I said, this is the ideal reaction to this question on the b4 pawn. So we don't want to close it immediately, like it would just give black a very free play in the center, and we don't want to take yet. I mean, it's not opening the position fully, so we don't want to take it, but just keeping the tension with a3 is ideal. And okay, I would say this is basically where opening phase ends, and white should be slightly better with the bishop pair, but black's position, as usual in the Nimzo-Indian, is very solid and quite playable. I believe black's problem starts from his next move. He played d5. So basically saying that white haven't castled yet, so maybe opening the position is an idea, but just castling is one move away, so it's not really that black has a lot of time. With decent, opening the position should favor the pair of bishops. So d5 is a little bit counterintuitive at this moment. It's not too bad, but illogical. So it's better to refrain from this move. I looked at the more logical move f5. So this is a very standard pawn structure which black likes to employ without the dark square bishop. So very firm control over the light squares. Maybe this knight can come to f6. It's quite nice. For example, here short castle, and yeah, there are normal moves like queen e7 are available, for example, but just a normal game. I believe what is interesting to know here for white is the idea of d5, even when it's a pawn sacrifice. So, for example, knight g5 is an interesting move. Immediately creating some threat on f3. And normally, when black's attack is going strong, I mean, for example, also like if rook f6, d5 is a typical way. But now, of course, it's very understandable in the sense that it opens the long diagonal for the bishop, right? So it's it's quite easy to understand. In case of knight g5, it's a little bit more complicated because it looks like, okay, the pawn is hanging. So black takes the pawn, ed. And really the point is that we just open the diagonals for the bishop. Okay, if black is not taking the pawn, then we will just protect it and the bishop will be completely closed. So question is what happens if bishop d5, and here we can just play rook a to d1. And this is actually a very good position for white already. So for example, bishop takes f3, and here we play gf. Not only our king is completely safe, the plan is to play king to h1 and then rook to g1 and even attack on the king side. Besides that, these diagonals for the bishop have been opened, and also the d6 pawn is a target. So this position is just really, really great for white, despite being down a pawn for the moment. So this typical idea of d5 is quite typical in these lines. So d5 was played in the game. White played very logical, took on c5. So this opens this diagonal, and now took on d5, which opens this diagonal. So these trades were very good for the bishops, and now just short castle. Of course, again, still nothing too dramatic for black, but long term, the position is opening. Eventually, the bishops will be very strong. And it's also important that pawns are on both sides of the board. So, for example, if black would completely trade off here on the queen side by, let's say, if white would play like this, then of course the bishop pair is not so relevant because black is easily protecting everything on the queen side, and this side of the board is empty. So having bishops looking over there is irrelevant. But of course, a5 in such case should be met pretty much always by b5, keeping potential weakness and a strong protected pawn for white. So instead of this, black went rook c8, and white played bishop a6, which is a very nice move. It's a little bit uncomfortable to meet for black. He went rook c7. If he would have attacked the bishop with rook c6, then there is bishop b5. And now there are some issues. So rook has to stay on the c file, because if it goes away, then white can just take and then take the pawn. So rook goes back, let's say, but it's not a move repetition. Bishop was on e2, went to a6 and then to b5. So now white can play rook c1. And again, black is under pressure because he cannot take on b4, because after that raid on c8, bishop d7 is just a piece up. So on bishop a6, black went rook c7, and now rook a to c1. So basically, pinning the c pawn because the rook is unprotected. So like this idea of cb4 is not really available anymore. So black has to try c4. But yeah, this pawn can be very easily lose on c4, and yeah, in the game it fall very quickly. I mean, maybe it should not have, but it's just much easier for white to play here. Immediately queen e2 was played, so attacking this pawn on c4, and there is no very good way to protect. I mean, if you play something like knight b6, white can easily increase the pressure by bishop d4, not targeting the knight and then taking the pawn, or targeting it even more with the knight. So yeah, on c4 it's not really good. So black played c3, which is correct, but the pawn is getting way too advanced, and yeah, it's hard to protect. Bishop a1, and now black played f5. That was a mistake. So he should have played queen f6, I believe. But just optically it looks very difficult, because, for example, bishop d3, and I believe this move is the reason black started with f5. So white puts pressure on the knight, maybe can bring the queen to c2, adding an additional pressure on c3. Sometimes the knight can block the queen's diagonal, so it looks really, expected that this c3 pawn will fall. Of course, the computer can find some ways, to keep it, and claiming that position is not so bad for black, but practical game it's really difficult, because okay, it's a passed pawn, and it's quite far advanced, but there is no way forward for it. So it's rather a weakness in this position. I'm not talking about actually the fact that once our knight moves, we can also play f3 to kick the main protector on e4. So f4 was played now, just rook fd1, queen f6, and knight d4, and basically the game is over, because black has no defense against f3 or knight b5, and white is just taking the pawn on c3 with a completely winning position. There is absolutely nothing black could do here. He went knight b8, just bishop d3, and there is really nothing to do. If black would try to bring the rook, white can, for example, play knight b5, attacking everywhere, and then kick the knight and collect on c3. So, extremely easy win. So the rest of the game is not so interesting. I will just show you f3, knight g5. White has the advantage of the bishop pair and an extra pawn. So yeah, just getting out of any potential tactical tricks on f3. So for example, knight c6. I mean, it is still winning because there is the threat of knight e7. But I mean, we don't need to allow any such things anyway. So I just went out from the pin. There was one trade again. Huge pressure on f3, but simply rook f1 protects everything. This is also something similar. If you saw the video yesterday, that the queen just went to the king side and protected everything. Yeah, and now the pawns on the queen side are just going forward, and there is no way to stop. So one more trade, queen e5, bishop c2, and then queen c7. Basically, it's a must to trade the queens, because otherwise there would be mate. And okay, if trade, then black should block like this, and then, for example, bishop b3, knight has to move, white collects on e6 and has a easily winning endgame with 2 extra pawns. So it was one more example about this, more typical Nimzo positions of the queen b3 line, where black is essentially losing a tempo with bishop c3, but the game, of course, still remains playable. So I hope you like this video. If you liked it, please subscribe or just put a like to it. And I hope to see you in another video tomorrow.